There are intelligent people who never go hungry, and there are intelligent people who are always in a tight spot. It's not a lack of ability. It's not a lack of education. It's not a lack of opportunities. Solomon noticed something unsettling. Intelligence doesn't protect anyone from poverty. He saw brilliant men make bad decisions. He saw capable people destroy everything with simple choices. And he understood why some accumulate wealth, while others accumulate anxiety. Today, you will understand the silent mistake that causes intelligent people to become poor, even when they work hard, know a lot, and seem promising. If this type of reflection makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel now. Because here, we don't talk about making more money. This section discusses how to make fewer mistakes throughout life. Now silence, because this will affect how you make decisions. But before continuing, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, because now I'm going to reveal to you what Solomon explained about why intelligent people become poor. Solomon understood that intelligence, when left unchecked, becomes an elegant trap. It makes no noise. It's not scary. She's convincing. Intelligent people learn early on to trust their own judgment. They analyze quickly, connect ideas, and see solutions before others. Over time, this ability creates something dangerous, the feeling that there will always be a way out. And when someone believes they can always get out of any situation, they begin to expose themselves more than they should. Solomon observed this closely. He saw brilliant men making overly bold decisions because they had too much self-confidence. It wasn't a lack of logic. It was overconfidence. Their intelligence led them to ignore simple limits, such as safety margins, reserves, and prudence. Everything seemed controllable. Everything seemed reversible. This is how blind trust is born. The person thinks, I know what I'm doing. And because he knows this, he stops heeding warnings. Stop calculating worst-case scenarios. Stop accepting that you might be wrong. Solomon warned that the problem is not trusting one's own mind. The problem is trusting it without questioning. When intelligence is not challenged, it begins to decide on its own. And solitary decisions, in the world of money, tend to be costly. Many intelligent people go into debt not out of necessity, but out of conviction. They believe that the return will come, that growth is inevitable, that the future will correct the present. The logic seems sound. The risk seems small. But the mistake is hidden, the absence of humility in the face of uncertainty. Solomon observed that the more intelligent someone considers themselves, the less they tend to prepare contingency plans. The person doesn't think about the worst-case scenario because that sounds too pessimistic for someone confident. They believe that thinking about risk is doubting themselves. And so, they move forward without protection. Time passes. Life changes. The market changes. Circumstances change. And that decision made with such conviction begins to show cracks. But the intelligent person persists, doesn't back down, adjusts, pushes, justifies, because admitting error wounds the identity of someone who has always been seen as capable. Solomon understood that blind trust doesn't lead to impoverishment all at once. It leads to impoverishment little by little, in choices that are a little bigger than they should be, in commitments made prematurely, in unnecessary gambles. Intelligence creates the illusion that thinking well is enough. But money doesn't respond to anyone's internal logic. It responds to objective limits. Whoever ignores this, even if brilliant, pays the price. Solomon observed that intelligent people rarely fail due to a lack of ideas. They fail because they don't accept that ideas also fail. Overconfidence prevents them from stopping when they should. They don't retreat when there's still time. They don't simplify when the risk increases. And this is where the trap closes, because the intelligence, which should protect, begins to expose. The mind, which should contain, accelerates. And the person continues advancing, convinced that they are in control, while control was lost long ago. Solomon warned, whoever never doubts their own intelligence begins to make decisions without restraint. And decisions without restraint, sooner or later, exact a price that not even the most brilliant mind can avoid. That's the first mistake. Not a lack of ability, but it's a confidence that prevents one from seeing limits. Solomon observed something that confused many people. Knowing a lot didn't prevent anyone from making mistakes. On the contrary, in many cases, It increased the frequency of error. Intelligent people accumulate information, understand concepts, and easily explain what should be done. But when the time comes to act, something strange happens. Knowledge stagnates. The decision takes a different path. Solomon understood that there is a silent distance between knowing and doing. And that distance is where many intelligent people remain poor. They know the basic rules. They know that spending less than you earn is essential. They know that savings bring security. They know that long-term debt imprisons the future. None of this is new to them. The problem has never been ignorance. The problem is that intelligence creates a false sense of safe postponement. The person thinks they can break the rule now because they understand the rule. They believe that, by knowing, they will have control later. It's as if knowledge functions as a moral credit. They allow themselves to err today because they trust they will make up for it tomorrow. Solomon observed this pattern repeatedly. Capable people making small wrong decisions, not on impulse, but through emotional calculation. They know it's not ideal, but conclude it's not serious. And that's exactly where the mistake lies. Because what impoverishes us is not the isolated error. It's the habit of allowing constant exceptions. The intelligent mind excels at creating sophisticated justifications. It transforms concessions into strategies. It turns shortcuts into conscious decisions. Everything seems logical. Everything seems temporary. But time does not respect explanations. It only accumulates consequences. Solomon warned that discipline doesn't come from knowledge. Discipline comes from repeating the obvious, even when no one is pressuring you. Intelligent people tend to tire of the obvious. They want better solutions, more elegant systems, smarter decisions. And while they pursue these things, they stop doing the simple things. Save. Wait. Reduce. Say no. None of this seems stimulating to a brilliant mind. So the person procrastinates. They start tomorrow. They adjust next month. When their income increases, they get organized. And so, month after month, the future is used as an excuse for the lack of discipline in the present. Solomon observed that money doesn't reward those who understand. It rewards those who practice. It doesn't respond to intention. It responds to behavior. And inconsistent behavior, even if explained logically, generates instability. Over time, intelligent people find themselves working hard, thinking a lot, but making little progress. They feel constantly busy, always planning, always adjusting. But they never stabilize, because they never made the basics a non-negotiable rule. Solomon understood that prosperity doesn't require daily genius. It requires consistency. It requires accepting that doing the right thing repeatedly is more powerful than thinking well occasionally. And that's why intelligent people become poor. Not because they don't know the way, but because they believe that knowing is enough. And while they believe this, they continue to postpone the actions that truly build security. Ultimately, poverty doesn't come as a surprise. It arrives as a result of conscious decisions that were never implemented. And Solomon observed that between knowing and doing there is a chasm. Whoever doesn't cross it, no matter how intelligent, remains trapped on the wrong side. Solomon observed that intelligence, when confronted with uncontrolled emotions, ceases to be a form of protection and becomes a tool for self-deception. Intelligent people rarely see themselves as impulsive. They see themselves as rational. And that is precisely what makes mistakes harder to perceive. Emotion in them doesn't appear in a raw form. It comes well-dressed. It comes organized in arguments. It comes explained with logic. Solomon understood that intelligent people don't make ordinary emotional decisions. They make well-justified emotional decisions. They don't buy things to feel accepted. They invest in their own image. They don't spend money to alleviate anxiety. They reward effort. They don't make commitments because of social pressure. They strengthen relationships. Everything seems sensible. Everything seems strategic. But the impulse is still there. It's just been translated into the language of reason. Solomon observed that this is one of the most costly mistakes in life. Because when emotion disguises itself as logic, there is no restraint. The person doesn't feel guilt. You don't sense exaggeration. They feel conviction. And decisions made with conviction are repeated without question. Intelligence creates sophisticated explanations for simple desires. And the more intelligent someone is, the better they become at internally defending their own choices. They don't need to convince anyone. They convince themselves. And that's enough. Solomon warned that money amplifies everything it touches. If it touches discipline, it builds. If it touches uncontrolled emotion, it corrodes. Intelligent people often underestimate this. They believe they can separate feeling from decision, but they rarely succeed. The problem doesn't appear with the first expense, nor the second. It appears in the pattern, in the lifestyle that grows faster than the financial structure, in the help that is repeated beyond the limit, in the commitments made to maintain an image consistent with what is expected of someone intelligent and successful. Solomon observed that many intelligent people don't spend money to impress others. They spend it to avoid disappointing their own narrative. They need to uphold the image they have built of themselves. And to do so, they accept silent costs. Emotion, when not acknowledged, infiltrates daily decisions. It influences the car chosen, consumption patterns, agreements made, and risks accepted. And intelligence comes in later, only to explain why all of that was necessary. Solomon understood that the greatest danger is not feeling emotion when dealing with money. That's human. The danger is denying that it exists. Because what is denied cannot be controlled. And what cannot be controlled decides for itself. Over time, intelligent people begin to live constantly on the edge. Not because they suddenly lost control, but because they never admitted they were being guided by something beyond reason. Each decision made sense in isolation. The problem is that together, they created a constant burden. Solomon warned that when emotion and money walk hand in hand without vigilance, the price doesn't come in the form of immediate bankruptcy. It comes as continuous tension, constant worry, lack of margin, lack of peace. And the most dangerous thing is that the person doesn't understand where they went wrong. Because, in their mind, everything was thought out. Everything was calculated. Everything was explained. But the calculation never included the accumulated emotional impact. Solomon observed that those who use their intelligence only to justify their feelings end up being governed by them. And in that state, it doesn't matter how brilliant the mind is. Decisions cease to build stability and instead serve only to sustain momentary desires with convincing arguments. That's the third mistake. To feel no emotion, but to allow her to decide, while reason only defends her. Solomon observed that intelligent people have a dangerous relationship with time. Not because they disrespect it, but because they underestimate it. They believe that, by understanding things quickly, they will be able to correct any deviation before it becomes serious. Time, for them, always seems recoverable. An intelligent mind projects the future with ease. It envisions scenarios, possibilities, alternative paths. And precisely because it can imagine future solutions, the person allows themselves to relax in the present. Solomon understood that this is one of the most silent illusions that exist. The person thinks it's still too early, which is then adjusted. We'll sort that out later. And while you're thinking like that, time is passing by without warning. Solomon observed that intelligent people often treat time as an automatic ally. They believe it will work in their favor simply because they are capable. But time does not favor ability. It favors consistency. It is not impressed by plans. It responds to repeated actions. The mistake isn't in making a mistake today. It's in believing that tomorrow you'll always be able to correct it. This belief creates constant procrastination. Small adjustments are pushed forward. Difficult decisions are postponed. And each postponement seems harmless in isolation. Solomon warned that time exacts invisible interest. A bad choice today may not seem burdensome, but when maintained for years, it becomes a structure. A standard of living slightly above what is possible. A fixed cost that grows slowly. A financial dependence that is never resolved. None of this explodes. It all accumulates. Intelligent people rarely notice this process as it happens, because they keep functioning. They keep producing. They keep thinking. They don't feel the immediate impact. They only feel constant pressure, a sense that they are always playing catch-up. Solomon observed that time doesn't destroy dramatically. It wears away. It wears away margins, patience, freedom. When a person realizes this, it's not a lack of intelligence to understand the problem. It's a lack of space to solve it. And this is where the mistake is revealed. Because correcting things early requires little. Correcting them late requires great sacrifices. Intelligent people believe they can do the latter, but they rarely consider the emotional and practical cost of it. Solomon understood that time transforms small decisions into destinies. What is tolerable today becomes burdensome tomorrow. What seems temporary today becomes permanent tomorrow. And the more time passes, the fewer options there are. Intelligent people often say they'll solve things when their income increases, when the situation changes, when the scenario improves. But time doesn't wait for the ideal scenario. It moves forward during good and bad times, accumulating effects. Solomon warned that prosperity does not depend on predicting the future. It depends on respecting the present, on doing now what avoids painful corrections later. Whoever ignores this, even if capable, pays with years of tension. Ultimately, time doesn't punish ignorance. It punishes negligence. Intelligent people don't ignore. They neglect believing they know enough to compensate later. And when they try to make up for it, they discover that time doesn't give back what was lost. It only shows the result. That's the fourth mistake. Don't make a big mistake, but making small mistakes for too long. Solomon understood that the difference between prospering and struggling one's entire life rarely lies in great successes. It lies in the ability to avoid repeating obvious mistakes. While many sought brilliant decisions, he observed something more subtle. Those who remain stable almost never make mistakes too big to correct. Intelligent people tend to value success. They want the best choice, the best investment, the most strategic move. Solomon saw that this constant pursuit of being right more often is exhausting and often dangerous, because it pushes people towards unnecessary risks, overly complex decisions, and bets that don't need to exist. Solomon observed that prosperity is born more from restraint than from boldness. Those who make few mistakes don't need to make many recoveries. Those who expose themselves little don't need grand upheavals. Stability is built in silence, while others seek grandiose moves. Solomon's principle was simple. Not destroying is more important than building quickly. Most people don't lose money because they did something very wrong just once. They lose it because they accept small, continuous mistakes. An overspending here, an emotional decision there, constant procrastination over there. Solomon understood that money respects those who create clear boundaries. Limits on risk, limits on lifestyle, limits on commitment. Intelligent people, because they trust too much in their own abilities, often find limits unnecessary. They believe they can operate without restrictions. And that's where they slip up. Avoiding mistakes requires humility. It requires accepting that not every opportunity needs to be seized, that not every decision needs to be made now, that not every logical explanation justifies a choice. Solomon observed that those who learn to say no frequently build freedom over time. Intelligent people want to move forward. Solomon taught preservation, because those who preserve can move forward when it really matters. Those who wear themselves out too early spend the rest of their lives trying to catch their breath. The most common mistake is thinking that prosperity comes from doing something extraordinary. Solomon understood that it comes from not doing what destroys, not taking risks that rob you of sleep, not maintaining standards that stifle life, not using the future as an excuse for excesses in the present. Over time, this principle creates something rare: margin. Margin for choice, margin for error, margin for peace. And margin is what separates those who live under pressure from those who live in stability. Solomon warned that those who constantly live on the edge, even if intelligent, end up making increasingly worse decisions. Pressure robs them of clarity. Urgency robs them of discernment. Avoiding mistakes early on protects the mind, enabling better decisions later. In the end, it's not the one who thinks the most who wins. It's the one who preserves themselves the most who wins. Intelligence can open doors, but only discipline prevents setbacks. And setbacks, when accumulated, negate any intellectual advantage. Solomon did not teach how to make more money. He taught people not to lose what they have already gained. He taught to minimize harm before seeking expansion. He taught that making fewer mistakes every day is worth more than getting a lot right only occasionally. Now the reflection is up to you. How many decisions in your life seem intelligent, but are they leaving you with no room to maneuver? Because, in the end, poverty rarely stems from a lack of ability. It is born from the absence of limits. And Solomon understood this like few others.